Welcome back to Automotive Insiders. I'm your host, Jason Stein. Great to have you back again with us. Over the past few years, artificial intelligence has become one of the most talked about forces in the automotive industry. But for many suppliers, the reality hasn't matched the hype. AI has felt a bit like the last blockbuster movie: fast, impressive, full of promise, but not always delivering meaningful results in day-to-day operations. Because while the headlines focus on agents and automation, most suppliers are still struggling with a more fundamental challenge. How do you actually get the work done? Meeting sustainability targets, managing reporting requirements, coordinating across multiple sites, all while teams are stretched thin and expectations continue to rise. And that's where the conversation is shifting from AI as a tool to AI as workflow. Our guest today, William Crane, CEO of OrbAid and a strategic partner with MEMA's Center for Sustainability, is focused on exactly that. Through a framework called CLAW, Context, Learning, Action, and Workflows, his team is helping suppliers move beyond theory and into execution, embedding AI directly into how work gets done across plants, teams, and processes. It's not about flashy demos, it's about measurable outcomes, improving productivity, reducing operational risk, and helping suppliers meet OEM expectations with greater confidence. My guest today, William Crane, CEO of OrbAid. William, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me as a guest on Automotive Insiders.
Thanks for having us, Jason. Really appreciate being on.
We're going to do a deep dive into how CLAW, which is context, learning, action, and workflows, is really helping automotive suppliers accelerate all sustainability targets across all sites, and doing it profitably, by the way. But let's start with your view on the unique challenges that are facing automotive suppliers in achieving their sustainability targets.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Jason. I think from our perspective, there's really three things. And I have a lot of empathy for folks because I've personally done a lot of this work too. And the first one is very personal, right? And it's sustainability professionals are wearing multiple hats, right? So even if you work full time in corporate sustainability and automotive supplier, you're probably doing reporting, which is a whole discipline, right? And doing some project work and probably a lot of other things, right? So there's more work to be done than what is really practical, right? So that's number one. Number two, we have so many targets. We actually did a study recently with the University of Michigan. It's over 50 plus concrete quantitative targets that the OEMs or a regulatory body is asking for, right? So we talk about emissions a lot, so reducing emissions, but it's far broader than that. So advancing all sustainability targets, really all of multiple things, is always tough, right? So if it's emissions, biodiversity, water reduction, waste reduction, and then, right? So that's number two, is all the targets. And then lastly, three, although it's nice, right? And we like to celebrate success on the journey when someone has success on one project or one site, right? We bring out case studies and again, like to celebrate that for the council. No one's after one success at one site. Every single automotive supplier, by definition, almost is global, has multiple multi-site operations, right? So you got to do this and repeat it across all sites, right? So those are kind of the three main things.
Given the scale of the challenge, what's your point of view, William, on what suppliers can realistically do if they want to meet their sustainability targets?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is, I think really looking at the task at hand and the work, right? So we look at jobs to be done. If you look at Clayton Christensen's kind of framework there of a series of tasks, and when you put these tasks together, they're workflows, right? So we're talking about what we focus on, which is sustainability project management. There's a number of tasks that have to happen and roll up together from going to idea to ultimately kind of delivered results, right? So data is a really big piece of it, but automating and looking at different ways to increase productivity, which again, we're very good at in manufacturing, especially in automotive, is really key. Because the one thing we're very confident, because we've seen this now for over a decade, is budgets are probably not going to increase, right? Probably not going to get more staff, right? So we got to get more efficient at doing the work, right? As we transition from really what is pollution reporting to ultimately delivering more sustainable business.
So, given those realities you just talked about, what can suppliers realistically do about it?
Yeah, so I think some of the things they can do certainly are taking a look at the actual work streams, right? And going from these one-off projects, right? Again, success is great. We want to celebrate that. But how do we scale success, right? How do we take a win and very shamelessly copy that at another site? Because often if you make, for example, exhaust systems, you probably have another plant someplace in the world that also does very similar things, if not the same part number, right? So some of those same learnings and best practices can apply. So I think sharing those learnings is really, really key. Automating repetitive tasks or things that are just more efficient to do, like reporting across all the sites and then rolling that data up is a big piece of it. So
So many people have a misconception about AI. I know there are some supplier misconceptions. What are the biggest ones you see?
yeah, that's a fair question. And certainly we're obviously very bullish on AI and its applications. I think um, applications is the key, though. Applying it no different than a hammer, right? If you're trying to pound a nail, a hammer's the right job, right? A sledgehammer, maybe not so much, right? So um, AI does not require perfect data. Does it make it maybe more efficient or better in some cases? Not all cases. Yes, right? Better data usually leads to better outcomes, right? But I think trying to be perfect is just not where we're at as an industry as it relates to artificial intelligence. It's not where we're at with like automation, even, right? So a lot of folks with AI will often talk about, well, let's automate this end-to-end process, right? We'll be more productive. That makes sense in theory. But it's often assisting humans, teams, right, with doing some of these micro tasks as part of a workflow and really empowering them, right? So, kind of to get this 100% automation and 100% data, put that on a shelf and think, how do we have, what is the data we have now, and what task in that workflow can we do practically now? I think is the big thing.
Yeah, and to that point, what are the most practical AI uses for suppliers today? There's a lot of misconceptions out there. What do you say is practical?
Yeah, so we focus on the sustainability project management side, right? So as it relates to reporting, right? So the big challenge right now we see is a lot of top-down reporting. Again, it's end to means we got to take a step on that journey. But really where you see the regulation in the industry going is bottom up, right? Let's get as close to the work as humanly possible and report the real work that hardworking humans did, right? At a site, right? And so automating your site roll-ups at the project level for all the work that's being done, and using that as your basis for your sustainability reports, an example, right? It's very practical. That's something we do. Rolling up that data, accelerating the execution side. So we talked about productivity a minute ago. That's really really big to accelerating that flywheel, if you will. So kind of taking a look at the tasks and the workflow is really really key too.
A lot of talk about agentic AI. I know you have a point of view on it. Why does it matter for suppliers, and how is it different from some of the chatbots that suppliers have tried previously?
Yeah, and we're big fans of disruptive innovation. Roll up your sleeves. You got to kind of taste it and try things. We really advocate that. We try to live and breathe that ourselves with kind of our tight innovation windows. But if you look at an agent, for example, like, and we have some fun with this. Typically, we'll describe it almost like a James Bond movie, right? So like agents are cool. You and I might like to see the next one, right? But there's a lot of hype around that, right? And can an individual at an automotive supplier use a chatbot to get an answer? Absolutely, right? Should we all be developing our own unique agents? In theory, we could, right? But what do large enterprises like auto suppliers thrive on? Repeatability, consistency, and processes, right? So if you're automating bad data or a bunch of individualized kind of agents, right, your workflow is going to break, right? Like that's how the math and physics work, right? So I think moving from just taking a look at these one-off wins and how do we systematically maybe develop a series of agents as part of a workflow. So we kind of look at agents as a neat tech, but it's really the workflows that are driving real repeatable value.
Yeah, you say workflows, not wizards, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
The biggest measurable gains really come from that re-engineering process end to end. Let's talk
Yeah.
about CLAW. As I mentioned at the outset, CLAW stands for context learning, action, and workflows. Why is that important for suppliers?
Yeah, and so there's this quote that I really liked the other day. We were kind of chatting internally about, if you have a broken process, you're going to get a broken outcome. And I'm sure there's some listeners like, well, no duh, like that we know that, we know that for 100 years, right? But I think we sometimes forget that we're leaders and best in many of these things, right? These disciplines, right? Like just because we make a part or a system, we think, well, we're not software experts in some cases, right? So, but a lot of those same learnings apply. We're just moving bits and bytes versus metal and in wires, right? And so if you take a look at process or that workflow, right? Um, what are the human touches? What's the value add as part of that? What's the waste associated with that? And if we're being frank, sustainability project management, many folks that are MEMA members or leading in all kinds of categories are really just starting to scale the operations piece of their strategy as it relates to sustainability, right? You're just starting to realize sustainability projects at scale, right? So if we're kind of speaking in inside a conference room, right? You might not have a robust process for that, right? You might need to develop that, right, to scale across sites, right? And making sure that process is really tight before we start trying to automate things.
So let's get into a little bit more than the nitty gritty, I guess. Talk to me a little more about multi-site operational considerations.
Yeah, so super important as it relates to standardizing workflow is really important. And I mentioned the synergies if we're making the same part or same system, right? But there's a lot of unique things about different zip codes, different parts of the world, not just regulation, right? So it's this kind of chicken to egg or kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth, it seems at times of, we want to be standardized, right? But we also want to be unique. And in some cases we have to be, right? And so because a site might make a certain portfolio of commodities, right? Water use might be number two on their list, right? But in the same supplier, the same group, right? We might find that waste is the biggest or second driver of value or things we got to think about, right? And so trying to get that right recipe for each site of what matters most and really standardizing and automating as much of that possible is really key for multi-site operations.
What sustainability project management pain points are suppliers struggling with the most, and which are worth solving with AI?
Yeah, so we've been really obsessing lately about really the task, or if you kind of daisy chain a couple of those together, a series of tasks within the workflows, right? We think there's just so much kind of low-hanging fruit there about automating things that that may be 10, 15 minutes a day of this individual, that individual. But when you start rolling it up a lot continuous improvement, right, that gets pretty exciting pretty quickly, right? Because what we start seeing is that flywheel effect taking hold, and then we're saving real time, which gives us more man hours to reinvest, and it's like having a bigger budget or bigger team, right? So if you take a look at things like we completed a lean project, say last year, right, for a supplier, delivered some cost reduction, delivered some tack time improvement, right? Well, gee whiz, that same project might have had an emissions reduction, but we just didn't think about it because we historically don't think about that, right? How do we take that delivered project plan, throw that into a very lightweight agent within the project workflow, and calculate that emissions impact and benefit from that, right? So again, that's very tactical, right? But that tech exists now, and that's a good example of things that we're trying to really push in here now.
So, final thing, William, how about OrbAid? How are you helping suppliers accelerate sustainability targets profitably?
Yeah, so what we really our mission for that matter is helping folks accelerate greener bottom lines, and we very unabashedly lead with business profits, right? Because if you got to make profit in order to take care of your company and take care of your family's light bill, right? So business profits are a big part of that sustainability journey, and also advancing sustainability, whether that be emissions, biodiversity, and that whole gamut. And so how we do that is we've got an AI assisted sustainability project management workflow tool, right? So what we do is under a minute, we pair sustainability projects and the whole business case, so like ROI, payback period, with individuals' goals, right? And so we did a ton of psychology research around, hey, you and I are motivated by similar, but not exactly the same thing, right? So if you're in accounting, your motivations professionally, personally are going to be different than someone that works in manufacturing at the same company, right? So how do we get that individual goals, right, as closely aligned as humanly possible to the company's targets, say emissions reduction, water reduction? And when you do that, right, lots of positive stuff starts happening, right? We increase engagement with employees, And so after that matching, we kind of compare that to Netflix, right? So we mentioned like James Bond movies earlier, right? So you or I watching James Bond movies on Netflix, right? We're going to get more and more like things. We're going to get Reacher, other things like that, right? And so we give those recommendations, all team members have to do or users have to do is just accept or reject it. You hit one button, right? You copy into your instance, and then we go out in the public domain and get more stuff like that. So we're constantly creating new projects and keeping that pipeline full. And then from there, it goes into a workflow, very simple workflow. And that's a big part of scale, right? Because you want that standardized workflow to get those results across sites. And then we recommend every single task next step using AI that users can choose to use or not use, right? So it's an assist to help them, again, accelerate that journey. And then lastly, it's addressing that last part, which is the multi-site operations piece. So as you have success with many members or having that success, you want to roll up all that data as close to the action as possible, right? So we're rolling up the projects at the bottom up level across the company. And that's great data to have for the sustainability report.
Wonderful. What a great overview. William Crane, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for shedding some light on a very complicated subject.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Jason. Thanks for making it fun.
Thanks again to my guest today, William Crane, CEO of OrbAid. And thank you for listening to this program. You can come back to this podcast platform for more interviews throughout the year. I'm your host, Jason Stein. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.